All right, guys, we're on our episode 3 of the Devy Dashboard podcast. I am happy to announce that I've got 3 great guests. KCB, you're a regular here, right?
I am now.
All right. We got Austin, Debbie at Debbie Dietz, and Kevin at Du Bois 22. So, Austin, where are you from, man? And what you got going on in the Debbie space?
Yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh. Big Steelers fan as a result. Devy work-wise, I do a couple podcasts. I'm on Devy Debate with Felix, who's been on here a couple times, and Matt Bruning. And then I do a show, 2 shows, Campus 2 Canton every week that kind of focus on Campus 2 Canton leagues. I do that with my buddy Colin. So
cool. Yeah. Kevin, what you got going on?
Yeah, I live over here in California, sunny time. And, I have a podcast, Double D's. We focus on Dynasty Devy. And then I just write Devy work for hammercast.com, and currently just going through all the rookie class right now and doing deep dives. And then on the side, doing some 2024 class stuff. I love going in deep in those guys. So that's what I've been kind of doing on my free time.
Yeah, well, that's what we talked about at the pre-show, right? Getting into that stuff here on this podcast. Casey, I don't think you're doing any podcasts or anything, but you've been certainly knowledgeable, man. The last 2 episodes cranking out some good stuff.
Yeah, I'm not an official podcaster yet. Maybe in the future, but I guess I can share that. Sadly, I'm in Western New York, but I'm actually a Dolphins fan, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
So I've lived my whole life in suffering, but no, I grind film. I'm in quite a few fantasy leagues, and I do it all year round and love it. So.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about the 2021 class wide receivers. And then we were talking pre-show, and I was telling these guys how excited I was because really, first I want to kind of give you guys an update, on the dashboard. First and foremost, thank you guys for, joining the dashboard and being part of the Slack community. That chat has exceeded my expectations. I think I've mentioned that a couple times in the chat. So today we're going to talk about the 2021 wide receivers, but I was excited because like I said, been torturing myself on what content that I want to focus on, right now. And I was thinking originally it was going to be really focusing on the 2021 class of the rookies, but you guys made it clear on that little post that I put out there that you want me to go deeper and all that, which is music to my ears because I am exhausted of the 2021 class. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say, so you guys can see my face, number one, what the hell I look like, but number 2, kind of give you an update that what I want to do on the dashboard is I'm going to just pass on putting any more content on the 2021 player profiles because I want to focus on putting stats out on the 2022 through 2024 class. And that's like stats that, from PFF and some other things. So I was just thrilled with the outcome of focusing on that kind of stuff, on the deeper stuff, because that's what I want to do. So since the last podcast, we've got 24 new members to the dashboard, which is pretty cool. So we're growing. We're up to like 134 members. Not everybody is on the Slack chat. There's a lot of guys that I think are watching, but they're not talking, which is fine. We want everyone to feel comfortable, being a part of this thing. So I got some exciting stuff coming up. It sounds like everybody loves to do the mock drafts. So I'm creating a Google Doc that's going to make that process a lot easier. That's actually going to create an ADP for us. And then I'm going to put that into the dashboard. So everybody has ADP as they go into, their Devy campus to Canton drafts and stuff like that. So I'm not going to do a ADP for the rookies that are going, like I said, music to my ears, the 2021 class, goodbye. I'm going to have my rookie big board out there, and I'll probably adjust that as we get closer to the draft. But I really want to focus on, providing that other content. And I'm reaching out right now for an analytics guy to join our team. I'm in talks with like 3 people right now who are actually going to join in and help me provide all the analytics stats to the dashboard, all the numbers we love, the dominator breakout, all that great stuff. I don't have time to do all that stuff. I love making films. That's what I want to do. I want to make films and do this dashboard podcast eventually once a week where we're just grinding film and watching film and talking about players and their physical traits on the screen. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to try and bring in some sort of partner who is going to just continue to feed the site with stats, and every stat that is available out there, be crunching numbers and putting that stuff out there. So I'm pretty excited about that. After this podcast, again, with saying goodbye to the 2021 class, I'm going to start again putting out films, kind of like this one. We were looking at Jayla Waddle. I'm just going to play this right now. So just to give you a little glimpse of what I want to do is that, we're all able to talk about Jayla Waddle here and why he's my number 1 receiver. So, and again, you're going to see these traits. And then what we're going to do for future podcasts is that we are going to, doing this kind of format. I want to be talking about the freshmen that we just saw really, getting into their tape and really doing that. So I encourage everyone to, whoever wants to participate in something like that, to reach out to me on the Slack channel via Twitter, to be a part of that whole film grinding thing. Cause I think it's something out in the marketplace that's not there that could be really kind of cool for all of us just to learn. And we were talking about it with Austin actually before we went live here, was the fact that it's going to be great because we're all going to see different things, which is important because we want to learn from each other. We want to see, like, some guy's going to say, look how fast he is. And the other guy's like, no, I don't think he's slow. Look how physical he is. No, I don't think he is. But that's good. That's a healthy debate. That's how we're going to learn and get better. So I just wanted to kind of give a dashboard update, kind of for everyone who watches this, obviously, to kind of get a feel for that. So enough of me talking. I'm going to let someone else talk now. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on the Senior Bowl and what we thought that did for the wide receivers. Who were the kind of like, what did you guys take away? I'll start with you, Austin. What did you take away from the Senior Bowl?
It was kind of hard to take anything away because I think the guys that we all presumed would dominate, the one-on-one drills and everything like that kind of did. I mean, I think, you look at like a Dwayne Eskridge, who everyone is really talking about now, and those drills are designed for a guy like that to just go out there and kill everybody. But it was just nice seeing like him, Amari Rogers, Kate Johnson was a guy we didn't really get to see at all this year. And he had, by most accounts, a pretty decent week. So it was nice for some of those guys that like opted out or didn't really have that much of a season to show what they can do, I guess.
Kevin, what'd you take away? Anything?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys too about the Senior Bowl. Like the one-on-one drills for me, I don't take a lot of credence into those. I don't know how much you put a stock you put on those. I think they're nice. They're cool to see, but I don't necessarily know how much. I mean, and plus you don't even know who that corner is, most guys. And it's funny because when you compare them to who they're actually facing, you're like, oh, well, that corner at safety, they can't really cover anyway. We knew that. So it kind of elevates certain guys. So I was kind of laughing when I was watching it because you got to be careful because I think it can sway your opinion of receivers way too much than what you probably should. But I like what Austin brought up with Amari Rogers. I kind of like Amari more than some, but I think he's going to fit pretty well on an offense somewhere, wherever he gets drafted. I think he's a good fit. Yeah. And I don't know what you guys think of Demetric Felton from UCLA. He's an interesting prospect for me. He caught 2 passes and he had that. He has versatility, and it looks like he can be creative. But I don't know. It's really going to see where he fits because he doesn't have the production that you'd like to see. But I like Felton. He kind of showed me something, and maybe he's someone that we can kind of look forward and maybe he'll sneak in there, right? The 3rd, 4th round of rookie draft.
I think so. Yeah, I think. Yeah, he's just one thing, Casey, and I'll let you go. Is that he's on that borderline, right, of like the smaller back that you're going to take a shot of. We talked about this the last podcast. Me and Felix got into this when we were talking about Ramondre Stevenson. The bigger guy. Where are you going to go with the smaller guy? I think he would be a great compliment to a guy if they've got a banger. Like the first 2-down guy. But yeah, certainly explosive out of the the backfield. What were you going to say, Casey?
I was just going to say, with regards to Felton, that, I sort of agree. It was interesting to see them really run him at those receiver reps to be able to actually, consider that, they do see that, hey, this guy's probably not going to be, a main running back component in our backfield. This guy is more of a gadget guy or maybe a receiver. At least that's what I took away from it. At least that NFL teams are open to that and are already considering that. I think being able to see that's important. With regards to just the Senior Bowl in general, I mean, like you said, the guys who we expected to show up and do well, like Tylan Wallace, they did. And the one-on-one drills, definitely, the lower competition. And also, you don't have an entire playing field. You don't get to see really timing as much. Sometimes quarterbacks are throwing after, the receivers are already separated. You don't get to see that linebacker sitting in zone coverage and, the receiver being able to get away and catch the ball before, the quarterback has to worry about that linebacker. You don't get to see the entire field of play and see that speed. One thing I was already listening to a podcast Katie put out with Chad Parsons from UTH. And they were talking about like receivers can cut their route short after they've already done it a few times. They can essentially short their routes and beat the corner. Katie said that, not me. So I think that's really smart to think about that. It's really easy to get away with a few things on tape. You produce something that goes out on Twitter, people love it. You blow up. Cade Johnson did have an amazing catch. But this is sort of the thing that can fool us into bumping up players that may not necessarily deserve that bump.
Yeah, and I think Eskridge is the perfect example of that. I mean, even the professional scouts didn't even think about this guy until 3 weeks ago. I've never heard his name a whole lot, until a month ago. Now it seems like he's the Debbie Darling, as I like to call them, So let's talk about, I think a lot of guys that do join the dashboard are looking at film and looking at how we look at wide receivers. So I wanted to kind of go around. I'll go last because I went first last time. So Austin, what do you look for when you're looking at wide receivers?
So I think the easy answer is, you want to see a guy that has good hands. You want to see a guy that, creates some separation, either, via technique or athleticism or savvy at the catch point. There's obviously some sort of baseline of athleticism that all these guys need to have to be able to succeed in the NFL. But I think the big thing that I look for, to be honest, is just a guy that kind of wants to destroy the person across from him. I tend to fall for those receivers. A guy that's why I like George Pickens so much, because I think he just wants to, crush whatever corner is lined up against him. That's why I was Justin Blackman is my favorite, wide receiver prospect ever, because he was like that. Michael Crabtree, just because I think those guys, that attitude that you always want to win, that you want to continue to do better, that I guess it's a little bit of a swag as well, that you can't really teach. A guy has that or he hasn't. Mm-hmm. And I think more good wide receivers have that kind of mindset than a passive, if the ball comes to me, I'll do whatever. So I like an aggressive guy at the position.
What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, no, Austin's a smart guy there. I like that too. And the easy thing is hands. For me, it's his release off the line and how well he does at creating against that press coverage. And I don't care how he does it, if it's footwork, strength, whatever he does, can he get off that line, explode off that line, and then give himself the opportunity to go catch the ball? So for me, it's the release and the contested catch. They're really close to me, because I feel like I don't want to go to those wide receivers that have a hard time catching the ball in traffic. I like those guys that can create that separation at the last minute and kind of get up there at 50-50 balls. If they can win those for me, I really put them higher on my list. But the release off the line for me, how they explode, especially young receivers, because you can teach them footwork and you can do all that kind of stuff. I feel like that release is something that they either have it or they don't. I really do. And from a young age, it's kind of like that, the analogy, if you have two guys that run the first base, one guy does it perfectly, the other guy, they tie, but the other guy gets there, but it has really bad form. You want the guy with bad form because you can teach him the form and he'll beat the guy with perfect release. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's hey, I like that guy. Hey, can he get off the line? And then we could teach him how to route run. We could teach him the other stuff. And that's why I love Jamar Chase, because I feel like his release is just special. And so that's one of those areas where I really focus on.
Yeah, I'd have to agree completely. The first thing I look at is release off the line, like you said. Any way they can do it, however it happens. And usually that combines pretty well with speed. And also physicality. So normally, I combine metrics with looking at the game film. So you're looking for the guys that really do have those metrics, the strong BMI, at least for a receiver. You're looking at the guys that have really fast 40 that, it actually shows on the field that they're playing at a fast speed. But one thing I'll add that I typically look for, at least with receivers that sort of have that outside role, is body control. When they go to catch it on the deep balls, it's something that you really see from a lot of alpha receivers that end up turning out really well. And Jamar Chase is one you can often see him control and contort his body right at the sideline to actually bring in that ball without going out of bounds and keeping it away from the cornerback. I think that's something that you just sometimes can't teach. It's sort of that innate athletic ability, and I think it really shows when players have that, and then you'll see it when players don't.
Yeah, you guys said it, but just about everything. Space creation for me is first and foremost, because I think to myself, all right, all these receivers, they go to the NFL. What makes a receiver go to the NFL not make it? right? What makes them go to a team and not be able to get on the field like an Arcega-Whiteside, let's say, right? I think it's because they can't create their own space. Whether that's at the line or that's mid-route, at the stem, at top, in the middle. I've said this before. There's a guy on YouTube, and everyone should write this down. It's First Down Training on YouTube. This dude is the man when it comes to teaching the intricacies of defender manipulation. Those elite receivers in the NFL, they're winning those routes before they even make their cut, because they're leading that defender in a way that's going to set them up that when they do make that cut, they're already at an advantage, right? So all those little nuances of the head fakes and the shoulders and the leaning towards an outside coverage and going inside, I think that has to play. And one thing very important to me is the physicality too. We're going to talk about Kadarius Toney, why I think he's one of the overvalued receivers in this draft, because I don't like his physicality compared to the other players. When you watch his film, he goes down very easily at first contact. He hits the ground. Rarely he might stretch for a yard or two, but he's not going to move any piles. So a guy like that kind of, at that short height and that lack of physicality, concerns me. So, the space creation and physicality for me, just like you guys said, is, first and foremost for me. So we what we did here today is we just ranked our top 5 players, and then we're all going to talk about an overvalued player and an undervalued player for each of us. And then I just got a question at the very end that we're going to talk about. So, Austin, I'll start with you. Why don't you tell us your top 5 and just a general idea of why you kind of have them placed the way you do. Just tell us what your thoughts are.
Sure. So it looks like just kind of looking at our list here, we all kind of have almost the same combination. I think there's like 6 different names here between the 5 slots for all of us. I still have Rondale Moore number 1. And my big thing with Rondale Moore is that, I think of all the receivers in this draft, he's had the most impressive season of anybody. His true freshman year at Purdue, where it was put up like a 37% weighted dominator rating, which is even better than like Jamar Chase's sophomore year. He's not tiny, he's 5'9", 190 or so. I mean, we don't have an official, weigh in for him yet, but that's big enough in my opinion. And I just think that I think people want to try to pin him in as a gadget guy. And I think he's so much more than that. I think Purdue tried to get him the ball a lot because their offense just wasn't very good. But I think that he can succeed in the flow of an offense as well. So that's why I still have him number 1. Then I have Chase number 2, and a couple other people have Chase 1, so I'll let them talk on him. Waddle number 3. I mean, the game-breaking athleticism, it's definitely a factor. I have Bateman number 4 and Smith number 5, and they're very, very close. And I kind of depending on what day you ask me, I'll maybe tell you that Smith is number 4 and Bateman's number 5. Because I think there are some pluses and minuses on both of those guys, where Bateman's got a little bit of a consistency issue, I think, at times, and his hands are a little iffy as well. And Smith, I mean, obviously you can't ignore his, a little bit of the size concerns and, older prospect a little bit as well. So that's my top 5, but I'm just a very adamant Rondale Moore wide receiver 1 guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about Jayla Waddle. I mean, I made a film on him back in March, and I fell in love. The pitter patter in my heart hasn't stopped since. You know what I mean? Just everything about him. He can win vertical. He can win, short. He's just electric. He's a baller. He's going to get on the field with special teams alone for a franchise, which gets wide receivers on the field more. But let's just talk about Smith for a while, for just a second. Because all the draft guys got him still going in the top 10. I got him at number 5, and I'm right with you, Austin. I'm at Bateman, Smith. It could be any given day. But do you think we're going to start to see before the draft the Smith stock just continue to maybe whittle away a little bit?
I have to say, I think part of the allure of putting him in the top 10 is a lot of people want to put him to Miami. Because I think they just want to match him up with Tua again.
That's
in
stupid.
Their mocks.
In the second round, maybe, but not the first. I don't know if they're there at the second round at the top. I think that was a trade.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like that's what's playing in people's minds when they make that pick, because I see him at 3 more often than any of the other spots. And I just I think that's a silly reason to mock him that high. I still think he's probably a first round pick. But The size thing, like I'm not like, I don't really care about BMI and all that kind of stuff. I just think when you have so many other good players in this class, maybe in 2019, sure, if someone was looking for a wide receiver, that class was so weak, but this year's so strong, I don't think there's a reason to take a Devonta Smith in the top 10.
Yeah. How tall is he? Does anyone know at the top of their head?
I think he's 6'1". Did he?
6'1", 175. That's what the last weight I saw. But then at the comment, it was all weird, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that BMI, I guess, has to play a little bit of a role. I mean, he's really thin, I mean, and you're going to play with the big boys. I mean, there's a huge difference between college and the NFL. I mean, I think it's a lot more than people realize, and I put out on the Slack chat today, just kind of doing some research on, for tonight was, out of the top 40 fantasy wide receivers last year, only 12% of the players, 5 out of the 40 were under 6 foot. Right. So, that's not, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Beckham, and Marquise Brown. Those were the only top 40 fantasy producers this year, and the top 40 wide receivers that were under 6 foot. Now he's 6'1", but kind of using him as an example, you could put the Jayla Waddle argument in there, right? That he could be an outlier to that, so I think there has to be something to be said about, somebody maybe that small, but like a lot of these smaller, like the Eskridges and stuff like that, a lot of these smaller players, like Elijah Moore is another guy. Like I really love his skill set, his explosiveness, his vertical, but a lot of these guys might get drafted as a wide receiver 1, but they really might be more of a wide receiver 3 on a team.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think the thing with him is I think he's going to go too high. And so when I'm looking at my rankings, there's a lot of other guys I'm doing for that I think have a higher ceiling than him. I think we kind of know where Smith is at, and he's had a great year. But if Waddle stayed healthy, I think Waddle would be talked about as being like you. I love Waddle, just a little less than you, but I still love Waddle. But Smith, just for me, he's a good route runner and he does all those things. It's really just his size, right? That's really the biggest concern I have. And everybody tries to compare him to these smaller wide receivers, but for every Tyreek Hill, there's 30 Tavon Austins and all these other guys out there. And you got to get nervous a little bit. And I know Smith put up the great numbers, but he was an amazing offense. I don't know, but yeah, I laugh Austin too when I see him go I saw him go number 2 with somebody from the ESPN. I think they mocked him at 2 to the Jets, and I was just like, I'm gonna cry. I just wanted to cry when I see that stuff, because I think he is gonna fall into that maybe 15 to 22 range, somewhere in there maybe, or who knows after they kind of look at they do his pro day, what that's gonna look like. Because I think the BMI is a concern. Everybody jokes about it, but it's a real thing. That's a real If you look at analytics and the numbers, it does skew towards that he's going to be a miss, and that makes me nervous.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get into the analytics more and, just try to at least listen to them and, use the odds and the percentages, But I know there's some guys out there that don't even watch film and they make all their ranks and stuff just by looking at the numbers of Dominator and all that stuff, which is like a foreign thing to me. So, try to incorporate that. So Kevin, why don't you go through your top 5 here?
Yeah. So it's pretty, similar except for a couple. So I like, Jamar Chase is kind of, for me, I've loved him for, I've loved him for a long time. And so I think it's hard for me to kind of move him off of there just because of how great of a 2019 season he had. But like I said, he matches all the stuff that I look for in a top receiver. So it's one of those things where it just is a perfect fit for me right now. I think that he uses his body well, kind of like Casey was pointing out earlier, the way he can he has really good body control. He catches the ball at the highest point. He's really good with his hands when he's in coverage. And if you watch him on those 50-50 balls, I love the way he creates separation. I think that's an underrated part of his game. And I love it when I watch film. I could watch film on Jamar Chase all day. Ask my wife. I'm sitting in bed watching film on Jamar Chase, and she just rolls her eyes. And I love watching him play football. Jayla Waddle is the second for me, just because he just oozes that potential. He's fast. I'm interested to see what he's going to be. I know that I read an article recently, and I know that he has kind of recorded a 4.37, but I think he's in that range, and he has that speed. But some of those catches he's made, like the catch against Missouri, I believe it was last year. Some of those things that he's done on tape and film, you just wow, like that's a guy. He has good size. He has really good eye discipline. I think that's key for him. He doesn't drop a lot of balls, and he catches the balls well outside his body. I love watching his tape as well. And then when I was going through here, there's a guy that I really, as I'm kind of looking at, the rankings and everything, and just kind of going over it is, when you're looking at Marshall. So I don't know what you guys feel about Terrace Marshall. I really like him based on his potential and his ceiling. I have him as my third, and I know that might be a little high for some guys, but sometimes you got to just kind of go out there. And the game against Texas A&M, where he had 10 receptions, 134 yards, that really kind of set him apart for me. He's got ideal size. He does a really good job of shielding defenders away from the ball. He has a good catch point. He's really athletic. I know he's not going to run a super fast 40, but still probably in that 4.5 range. But I think that based on potential, I love his potential and what he could be. And I think he fits that mold for an NFL receiver, 6'3", 200. I really like Marshall. And then after that, it kind of like, it's funny that, Austin said that about Bateman and Smith. I have Smith fourth and I have Bateman fifth. And that's kind of how I feel like they're very close together. I have questions about Bateman and that Minnesota offense. I wonder if they shield a little bit. I know I had Felix on my podcast and we talked about this, and we were going to get yelled at by all the Minnesota guys. But we kind of talked about how that offense does a very good job of shielding and creating those open spaces for the slot guy, especially with the safeties. And Felix does a good job of breaking that down. And, after he said that, I went back and looked at the tape, and he was right to an extent. Like, how much is that system made kind of those receivers? And that worries me a little bit with him. So I have Smith above him, but I could see you switching those two guys back and forth all day.
It's interesting you brought up Felix, because at the beginning of the season back in the fall, we were watching Bateman, and him and I were, back on Twitter going back, and I had made a quick game film and had sent it to him. And I said, is it me, or is he just like lazily running through these routes? I felt like he wasn't very dedicated this season to like improving his craft, because didn't he opt out and then he came back and whatever. But I was like, this is not an elite route runner that we're looking at here. This is a guy who's rounding off his stems, just kind of working the middle of the field in space. And, so I just didn't see that decisive footwork, the body, the defender manipulation, all that kind of detailed, but look, he certainly has the size, right? So, and I'm always going to lean, unless you're for me, I've got Waddle number one. I got Chase, Marshall, Smith, and Bateman as well. So we all have the same five. Although Casey he's got the same five in here. I thought there was somebody who had. I guess Austin had more first. So he's the one who's like, got something crazy going on, which is great. Hey, I love it. Hey, don't take that the wrong way. I'm just saying, But for me, Waddle's so explosive, and I love his physicality. When he runs in the middle of the field, he is a horse to take down. His contact balance is for his size, I think is great. So I'm going to lean on him for that under that size, but I'll always go for the bigger receiver when I get to the middle of my drafts. I'm always going to go for the bigger, taller guy, as I get down the middle of the drafts, because I think they're just safer picks than the smaller. Like you said, Kevin, everyone's looking for the next Tyreek Hill. And I think Waddle would be the closest comp that I could get to him out of this class. Obviously, Tony doesn't come close, or any of those other players, but I'm always going to lean size. And I like your Marshall call too. I like that. So, all right, Casey. So you got the same guys too. What are you going to add?
Yeah. So, same general guys. I'll just list off the order. I got Chase, Rondale Moore, Bateman, Marshall, and Waddle. Now, Marshall and Waddle I've gone back and forth on just because of the explosiveness, as you said, from Waddle. Every time I watch him, I just see something new, and I'm like, wow, this guy is more than just, a speed threat down the field. I watch his change of direction, and I think it's right up there with the best. And I think that he has a role beyond just that deep burner type guy. And I think a lot of people see that speed and they immediately think that, and pray to God that the Raiders don't try to throw him in like they threw Ruggs, or, pray that an NFL team doesn't throw him in the way the Raiders threw Ruggs out there this year. I guess what I'll talk to is still just continuing on the Devonta Smith thing. So one, this class is stacked. These receivers are awesome. They all have different roles in the NFL, probably slightly. There's a lot of potential, but when I think to Devonta Smith, I don't have him ranked in my top five, and it's pretty much because I know that his price, like you guys are talking about, the NFL draft's going to have him probably in the first round. His price in fantasy drafts is probably going to be pretty darn high. And I feel that there are values below. If, let's say, Devonta Smith were to be around the early to mid 2 in a super flex, sure. But if you're going to tell me that, I've had people talk about taking him over Jamar Chase. I mean, hello, I'm never going to ever take him over a Jamar Chase. So I think right now people are just overvaluing that. And if you think about sort of the metrics and the probability going back, he could end up being a good player, right? He balled out in college this last year. He didn't do it the years before, or as much, but he definitely played well. He's got really long arms. He catches with his hands, but the probabilities are quite low. Whereas you look at players like Jamar Chase, you look at Marshall, you look at Rondale Moore with an awesome BMI for a sub 6 foot guy. I mean, he's got speed, explosion. You got Bateman, even if, I'll admit the 2020 film wasn't as great as the 2019. I mean, these guys are awesome metric profiles and they have production to match typically. So there's just so much more in those guys than Devonta Smith has to offer.
Cool. So we're just going to talk about an overvalued player and an undervalued. So I'll go first here. And looks like me and Austin have the same guy in Kadarius Toney. Again, I look at Kadarius Toney, and it to me, his physical play strength, I think, is a concern for me. I know he's very shifty. I know he can create space. They used him. 75% of his catches were, within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage, used out on flats and all that. He didn't do a lot of vertical, receptions, which has me a little concerned too, that he's, just like a one-trick pony in the short passing game. But, I think he's going to be drafted as a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, but I see him more as a wide receiver 3, on a team. And that's my concern. Like he's getting hyped right now so much where I think he's going to start, like Van Jefferson killed it at the Senior Bowl last year, drafted in the 2nd round, a guy who, could create space, right? Probably not the best BMI. He was like a little thin and stuff like that. But, he was one of those guys after the Senior Bowl that creeped up with a good Senior Bowl that I felt burned a lot of people. No, he was probably late second, early 3rd round in rookie drafts last year. But that's my concern with Kadarius Toney, is just his physicality is my biggest concern with him. Austin, do you want to contribute? Because since he's your guy.
The same thing with me. And I just don't like to bet on those hybrid guys that much, like those hybrid running back wide receivers, which I feel like is kind of what he is. I think that more often than not, that doesn't really work out in the NFL. It's pretty rare. And the other thing for me, like if we want to talk a little bit about, like the analytical profiles, his weighted dominator rating by year, 6% as a freshman, 8% as a sophomore, 4% as a junior. Now I realize he wasn't necessarily a full-time receiver until this past year, but a 4th-year breakout on a team that like they had Kyle Pitts but like they haven't produced like any of these crazy wide receiver prospects. If Van Jefferson is the best player that was there alongside him, then I'm not sure, how much of an argument that is against it. So, he's going to go way too early for me. I think he's going to go early 2nd. I see people talking all over the place about how early they're going to take him, and I wouldn't touch him before like the 3rd round in rookie draft. So I'll have him zero places.
Yeah, I really like your comment there about that hybrid kind of wide receiver, because Amari Rogers is kind of that same cat a little bit, you know what I mean? And he's my kind of undervalued, so he's in that same thing. But I hear what you're saying. You'd rather have the guy that has the vertical game as well. So, Casey, who was your overvalued
player? It was actually Devonta Smith. So I just spoke to him. I can highlight another one, or you can move on and talk with Kevin a bit about his guy, because I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Who?
My Rondale Moore is overvalued. Yeah, I was figuring Austin was going to kill me at some point, so I was ready for it. I know he's way smarter than I am, but I think it's just for me when I look at overvalued. I just feel like Moore is in that same category as some of these guys that are going to go a little bit too high for me in terms of. I like Moore, but he's played 7 games the last 2 years. There's still a concern with. I don't do the injury prone thing because I don't think that's a real thing. But he has had some durability issues, and if he does have that hamstring problem, for a guy with his skill set, a hamstring scares the hell out of me because of what they need for how fast he is, what they're going to try to do with him. I think he's really going to be landing spot dependent-ish, I guess. I don't know if Austin agrees with that, but just are they going to be able to use him in the right way, which I think Purdue did a good job, but also Purdue, Moore was their best athlete, right? I mean, out of Purdue. I know when you look at what they had to do, they had to use Moore in a lot of different areas because they had really nothing out there. And I don't want the Purdue fans to yell at me, but that's kind of what they had. They had to use him in that mode. Is he a guy that can go into an NFL offense and maybe just be a wide receiver one? I don't know. I just don't see it. And so for me, I get a little worried about where he's going to go and just kind of that durability. And can he be a wide receiver one on a team like that? If he goes to a spread offense with a creative play caller, then yeah, maybe he can do it. But if he doesn't, or if he just goes to that team and say, hey, let's go, can you beat this guy one-on-one? I'm not sure if he can do it.
I think the thing that kind of assuages my concerns about that a little bit is that he outperformed David Bell in all the in the games they played together. If you look at their splits in those games, and I think people view Bell as a NFL, potential alpha or maybe, a good wide receiver too on an NFL team. And I know Bell has better size than he does, but I think that more the only thing we didn't see Rondale do a ton in college was go deep and, track the ball really well, go up contested catch. I think we saw him do virtually everything else. And the injuries, they don't scare me because I think that it was the same thing with Rondale this year or with Rashad Bateman this year, where they opted out and then to opt back in. I think everybody that's played a sport knows that training for a game is much different than, training for, I'm sure they were working on perfecting their 40s and, stuff like that. So I think they just were saying, we're going to take it slow with this kid because we don't want to ruin anything for him when it comes to him leaving after the season is over. So
that's fair. No, I meant more last year. Obviously this year it sucks. And it was kind of one of those things. I do. I'm glad you brought it up a little bit because I did put in this in my show sheet stuff is that he does struggle with that contested catches thing. And, I love the idea of 50-50 balls as one of my high traits. So maybe it's just one of those things where my high traits tend to differ a little bit from what you are looking for in terms of your receivers. And I would just rather go with somebody else that maybe can exhibit the traits that I'm looking for rather than Moore, who kind of goes away from what I look for in a wide receiver.
Cool. So my undervalued player was Amari Rogers. He's just somebody, that I'm going to target late in the second. I'm hoping for a good landing spot. I can see him, he played 70% of his routes out of the slot. I think he can win vertical too. He's got good hands at 80% catch rate. He took 75% of his receptions were down the middle of the field. So he's not really an outside guy, but if he could land on a team, I think that has twin trees on both sides or has their receiver in place, I kind of compare him kind of like a Duvernay from last year from Texas. He's the guy from the slide. He's kind of has the same build, big, thick lower half. I mean, a Duvernay really for the Ravens hasn't emerged, but we got to give these guys at least 2 or 3 years in the NFL to, really find their true value. That's always my feeling. I tend not to try and overreact after 1 year in the NFL if they do not produce. I would have liked to have seen Duvernay really get on the field a little bit more. The Ravens aren't, prolific at that position by any means, but I think if Rodgers lands on a good team that has 2 decent receivers, I think he could be a sneaky pick in the later parts of the draft. So, and, at the Senior Bowl, he kind of confirmed what I've seen. He was Clemson's primary target this year. I just thought he looked really good. So he's like a middle round guy that I'm going to kind of go after, I think, in a lot of my leagues. So Casey, who you got?
I think there's going to be a lot of values in this draft. I mean, there are just so many good receivers. I can't remember exactly which one I wrote down, but I love Maureen Terry. I love De'Ami Brown. Let me see. Which one did I write down here? Did I write
Terrence Marshall?
Terrence Marshall. Well, we already talked about him, so let me talk a little bit about Maureen Terry if nobody else has him.
Sure.
I didn't see anyone else have him. But this is a guy, he's an older prospect, which, from a metric standpoint isn't ideal, but he's just sort of a freak physically. He's got a big frame. He's fast. He actually, is probably going to do really well if testing ever happens and happens in a way that we can trust. But but he's really a metric marvel. And you watch him for Florida State. I mean, they did not have a plethora of good quarterback talent. He's constantly burning guys deep, and then when the quarterback underthrows a ball, he's fighting for a contested catch and winning it. The production maybe wasn't there until later on, but I just think this is a guy that probably in like you said, the 2019 draft in fantasy is going to go early second, late first, and we're probably going to see him fall to the late second, early third. And I mean, he was a guy that was really rising in Devy before this season, and since then, I haven't heard much about him. So I just keep him on the radar, and he is a high upside guy that could evolve into a consistent starter in the NFL on the outside.
Sure. So, Austin, you have Elijah Moore as your undervalued receiver.
I do. And I think this is totally like we could look back in 2 years or whatever, and we're like, how did Elijah Moore go so late in all of our rookie drafts and stuff? Because I think at this point we know like he's a slot guy. But I think NFL teams know that he's a slot guy too. I don't think he's going to get miscast as a guy that some team takes him and expects him to play on the boundary and do a bunch of crazy stuff. I think a team's taking him knowing he's going to go in the slot. He's explosive. He's got very good hands. I think actually of every wide receiver in this draft, he is the quickest upfield when he catches the ball. Like he's shot out of a cannon as soon as that ball gets anywhere near him. And so like I think he can bring a lot to an offense because the NFL values the slot position now. That's changed a lot in the past decade or so, where it used to kind of be an afterthought. You'd toss like your worst guy in there or whatever, and just they'd catch a couple balls or whatever. And then when New England did the whole Wes Welker and then Julian Edelman after him thing, like I think teams kind of started to catch on that that's a spot that you can really take advantage of. So I think Moore has the opportunity to be that, and even more, in my opinion, than that. So I don't think it would be crazy at all to look back in a few years and everyone just be like, well, duh, like why did nobody take him earlier than he ended up going?
I like your undervalued player, Kevin.
Yeah, this is kind of someone. I live in California, so I get to watch him a lot. So, Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC. We talked about this a lot on our podcast. I had Ben Ebby on from Destination Devy, and we talked about kind of what he likes to see. And we both kind of mentioned like intangibles and just how hard they play. And if you watch Brown, he has that. He's one of the hardest workers on that field. And I gravitate towards guys like that. I like guys, and he's underrated elusiveness. He has some elusiveness there. He's going to play in a slot, obviously, and he's going to be able to figure that out. He was pretty productive in college, and not just the 4 touchdown game that everybody was talking about this year. He did have in the first quarter, but he did have, he had over 2,000 yards receiving, 16 touchdowns there. I think that he's a pretty good deep ball. He has a good eye discipline. I know sometimes he dealt with some drops, but I think that I like his catch radius. He wins the 50-50 balls that we talk about. And I think that teams can line him up in a slot, and he can be deadly with slants and crossing routes. And I think that he's going to be one of those guys you can get in the middle of the second round, kind of like Ayuk did last year, right? You got him like probably in the middle of the second, towards the end of the second. Brown could be that guy. You're like, wow, he kind of transformed. I've seen a lot of different mocks. I saw him going to your Eagles. I know we talked about that when we got together. And then I also saw him going to the Cardinals, and like places like that with Fitzgerald leaving, maybe he slips in that slot. Kirk's kind of in wherever he lands. I think he can provide a safety. Now he's never probably going to be a wide receiver 1, but I still think he can be probably a solid wide receiver 2-ish, 3 in that category. But with where you're going to draft him at in the end of the second, probably somewhere in there, depending on where the running backs, and if you're in a super flex league, I love Brown as a value.
Yeah, I'll take him for the Eagles. I'll take him. I'll take anybody at this point. So what a disaster my poor Eagles are in, man. I'm telling you. Oh, what a mess.
I wish I could say I hate to see it, but I'm a Cowboy fan. So
I know.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I remember our conversation, Kevin. So we talked about a late round sleeper, a guy that you're going to take in all your rookie drafts, right? That's kind of what we talked about. I'm going to take Frank Darby. I've always been a Frank Darby fan from Arizona State. Now he's a deeper guy. I did a film on him, an extensive film on him. Now this year's tape, he didn't really have any. He got hurt. we played I think 2 or 2.5 games. So this year's out the window. But the year before that, he played in the Z position primarily, and was really, really a great down the field vertical threat. And what I saw on film is when he caught the long ball, he always had guys, trailing him to 2 to 3 yards. So he didn't find himself in a ton of, contested catch situations. Has decent hands, not the best, but I just love his looseness. And I think the thing I love about the one thing we don't know about any of these players are the intangibles. And from what I read at the Senior Bowl, he was the hit of the entire offensive, scheme and just keeping the locker room light, and everyone loved him. He's a team leader. So I think he's got those intangibles, but I've always liked what I saw when I made his film. I'm a big Frank Darby fan. I hope he lands in a great spot. Again, he's not going to be a wide receiver 1 or 2, but he, all these guys we're talking about are going to be complementary pieces that, we could try and, get lucky on them contributing at their, at least, in the first few years in the NFL. Casey, I don't even know the guy that you've got listed down here. Who the hell is this guy?
Sure, I'll talk about him a little bit. So this guy is out of Charleston, West Virginia. He was actually born in the Bahamas, and born and raised there. And he's actually got a brother he plays in college, I think, as well. But this guy is one of those metric dart throws for me. We're talking 4th, 5th round in rookie drafts, probably on the late end of the 4th. His name is actually, I believe, pronounced Michael Strawn, even though you'd probably think it was like Strachan or Strachan or something like that. But he's 6'5", he's 225. He reportedly has been running a 4.38 40. This is a guy who in 2019, I have it, he played in 11 games, 78 catches, 1,300 yards pretty much, and 19 touchdowns. Now, again, we're talking the competition is non-existent. Like, this is I don't want to be mean, but like we're talking backyard football here. You see the tape, there's very limited tape. It looks like, it's played at a high school somewhere. But this guy definitely has the metrics to be a producer in the NFL. Obviously would be quite raw, but we're talking late dart throw. He's right up there for me with Josh Imatorbhebhe. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's probably going to be a metric freak. And you've got some others that are down there, but yeah, look him up.
What does he play for?
Who? Strawn?
Yeah.
Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought he was playing in the Bahamas, you said. He's from the Bahamas.
Oh, he's from the Bahamas. Sorry. He moved to West Virginia, I think, for high school.
Cool. Austin, who you got?
Interesting. So Frank Darby, I would love for the Steelers to take him. I would love him as a Juju replacement, kind of fit in that roster. Similar size, I think skill sets, they can do a lot of similar things. So I'd love to take him. But so I put Brennan Eagles down, and I have no idea how this guy has gotten lost in the shuffle quite as much as he has, because I think people were talking about him like not quite on the same level as Maureen Terry, but like as a guy that like has that size and that athletic ability, and with a nice year in 2020 could vault himself up into the top couple picks. And obviously he didn't quite have that kind of a year. He started off the season just crazy slow, but he ended up having respectable numbers: 28 catches, 469 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But the things about, he's 6'4", 229. He runs like in high school, I think he ran like a 4.51 verified 40. So if he's anywhere close to that at this size, I like watch out. But like everyone talks about the athletic, metric guys in this class, and I just never hear anybody talk about Eagles anymore. Like he just completely fell off the radar. So I think he's a guy that probably I can get in the 4th round of rookie drafts. I probably will. I'll probably take him pretty much every league I'm in.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys fall off the radar like that because they don't have the flashy stats. I think there's a lot of guys that value players based on, so, I mean, he didn't have like fantastic stats at Texas, but I mean, they weren't horrible either, but that might be a reason.
And Texas really spread that ball around this year, and like all facets, like rushing game, receiving game, nobody really was dominating touches. I mean, it took them till game 9 to give Bijan the rock more than 5 or 6 times, and look how that turned out. So I just don't think they knew what they were doing with their personnel down there this year.
All right, cool.
Because they fired their coach and they had to bring in everybody, and they had Sam Ellinger throwing in the ball too. So there's that. Because I like Eagles too. I feel like he's gotten kind of pushed to the side. My guy, I kind of have a kind of love affair with this guy, but it's Isaiah McCoy from Kent State, 6'3", 200. He put on about 15, 20 pounds between his sophomore year and junior year. He came out this year, he has a dominator rating of 30% his second year. So he did have that breakout that you'd like to see. And that's from Jarek Backus, who I really think you guys should follow on Twitter. If you're on there, he's a really smart guy. And he had about 1,700 yards, 16 touchdowns in his career there. He's got really good speed, big play potential. He's a great run blocker. He has that intangible. He plays a hard, impressive motor. I really like watching him play. He's got pretty good hands. He's athletic enough to create separation, and even though he plays in the conference, at Kent State, they're playing in not the greatest conference and best competition. That's definitely a knock on him. He did play really well against Auburn 2 years ago, his sophomore year, and I watched that tape. The only thing that I have a downfall with him is I didn't really see him very much press coverage against him. So defenses didn't really have that press coverage against him, so that's definitely something to watch on. But he's got the size. Not a lot of guys are going to know about him because he's from Kent State and definitely doesn't probably have that big player profile. But I think he fits that mold of like a sleeper guy you can grab, probably undrafted, to be honest. He's probably going to be undrafted after the rookie draft. You could probably pick him up and stash him. But he's someone I think, depending on landing spot, he could probably play special teams as well. So I think he's going to be able to find a spot on the roster, and then he can kind of go from there. But I really like his profile.
Cool. All right, so I got one last question that I have on here. I don't know if you guys saw it on the show sheet or not, but it was, and I had a long conversation with the scholar himself, John, what's his last name, and Matt Hicks over at NFL Draft Bible, the guys that I'm involved with over there. We did a mock draft. I don't know, you guys may have saw it. We did a draft this week, and after we got off the show, I just asked them the same question, and John and I got into a big conversation about, could we be overvaluing Chase? At all. It just seems like when a guy is just so, after one season of production, a slam dunk to be the wide receiver one in so many people's minds with really just one season of production. He didn't do anything, his first season, and was part of the most prolific offense in college history, some say. With Justin Jefferson there as well, with Joe Burrow, who just had an amazing year. Is there a chance that he could disappoint a little bit and be just not what we thought he was?
Well, I can kind of go first, I guess, since I kind of a tie on Chase. I think, you mentioned, sometimes I think it kind of depends on what you expect from him, right? Because if you expect him to come in and be this all great, I saw someone put him in their top 12 of dynasty wide receivers one time, and I was like, hey, let's just relax. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. So I kind of think it depends on where you put him. But when you look at that team that he was on with, we saw what Justin Jefferson did this year, and he outperformed Jefferson on his teammate when he was out there. So that really makes me excited to see that, hey, we saw Jefferson put up record numbers as a rookie. Jamar Chase outperformed him on that LSU team. So I think everything kind of aligns itself to, hey, that's Jamar Chase. This is who we're going to be. I'm sure there's always maybe it could happen, but I think we're pretty much, for me, I think I'm valuing pretty fairly. I think he's my wide receiver one. But I can see where you're coming from if you do believe that he could be overvalued.
Yeah. It was just a good conversation that we had. So,
you always have to worry about that smaller sample size, but we go and we look at the film, obviously. You combine that with the metrics, and everything seems to add up. There's always a chance a player could miss transitioning to the NFL. We don't always know their intangibles, their work ethic, things like that. But what he did, last year was pretty prolific with competition. Like you said, Justin Jefferson was there. Even Terrace Marshall was there as well.
Sure.
He got a few. So, this guy was dominant last year. If you put him in the NFL last year, I think he succeeds. I really do. So, I can't think of anyone I would put above him, and I trust him completely.
What do you think, Austin, since you had more ahead of him? So
I think it depends on how you frame it with him. Because I don't think there's any elite wide receiver prospect in this year's class. There's no Julio. There's no like Sammy Watkins, I think, was on that level of a prospect. I don't think there's anybody on that level. I think there's a lot of very, very good prospects, but no one on that level. And I see a lot of people want to classify Chase as that. So if that, I think, is where you're putting Chase, then yes, I think he's overvalued. But if you're just saying, I think he has, he's a really, really good wide receiver prospect. He has a very good shot at being a team's wide receiver 1, and then we'll move from there. Then that's like when the conversation for me really starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. When have we last seen a prospect like Julio Jones? Just crazy.
Yeah, they don't come around that much anymore.
His name is George Pickens. That's his name. Hopefully, right, Austin? That's my guy too. Hopefully, that's him.
Oh, I tell you, now you know who's got me nervous is Katie, steak ass. She's steak ass. She was talking on the chat about the whole intangible thing about him. That the only downside to that guy, if he can't control his just demeanor, and is he coachable? Is he got the work ethic? Because I do think a lot of guys, in her defense, go to the NFL and think they can just win because they won at college and don't put the work in, don't put the effort, and they don't realize just they get the little taste of that cash and they don't put that extra work in, and it all kind of goes downhill from there. So, but I love Pickens. He's like my wide receiver 1 in next year's class. I mean, I just love his whole moxie, especially after he got in that fight at the end zone last year. I was like, oh, I love the tenacity of this guy, but that's a double-edged sword as well, right? So
it's very Des Bryant-esque.
Yes.
In that regard. But Des had great years. Des won me a couple of championships. Like, I love Des Bryant.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah, that's good.
So, all right, guys, I won't keep you any longer. So, Austin, just to tell everyone again, where can they find your stuff and what are you doing?
Yeah, right over at Dynasty Nerds, and I actually have another big project coming out here shortly, more on the Campus to Canton side. But then podcast wise, I have my Campus to Canton podcasts, and then Devy Debate as well every week. So
cool. All right, Kevin, you're in Hammercast, right?
Yeah, you can get me at hammercast.com. I have articles go up every week. I'm currently working on a couple rookie profiles. And then every week we do our podcast, Double D's, which is Devy Dynasty. And we just had Ohio State yesterday, so you can check that out. And we did a whole breakdown of Ohio State Devy.
What do you make of those wide receivers?
It is as a Michigan fan, I am terrified and makes me sad looking at that depth chart because it is so stacked that I even made the argument yesterday like Chris Olave could be the 3rd best receiver on that team next year. Yeah. And I truly believe that, and it scares me.
Why do you think he didn't go to the NFL?
I don't know. We were talking about that last night, and I can't see him improving his stock, right? Like his stock was already pretty high.
Right.
I can't see it being like a Devonta Smith thing because, like I said, Jackson Smith is there. You're going to have Garrett Wilson, who I think is better. You're going to have all these guys there. They're going to be the targets. The quarterback is going to be I know they have 3 really good quarterbacks, but who's going to be there? I think there's a lot of concerns about that. Like, can they get him the ball? I don't know. I don't know why he returned. I think maybe he thought maybe he got a bad draft grade and they said, oh, you're going to go in the 2nd round. He was upset about that and he wanted to go in the 1st. But it would seem to be that maybe he thinks he can get in the 1st round next year. But I would think that it would probably be the opposite. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we will see, I guess. So, all right, guys, I appreciate you sticking around. And again, thank you everyone for your support on the dashboard, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thanks.